Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to hear the presentations today. I want to thank Ksenia and Mark Reed for inviting me. And my class is here today, so shout out to my class. My students showed up for me today, thank you. So I want to start this presentation. I always like to preface it with there may be a little spice to this, but also a little bit of seriousness to this, or a lot of bit of seriousness to this. So the title of my talk today is Until the Lion Tells the Story, Reclaiming Voice, Power, and Knowledge in Research and Practice. My name is Dr. Megan Ebor. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Social Work. I am the director, the founding director of the HER Multimedia Lab, which stands for Health Equity Research. And I'm going to present today through the lens of an African proverb. Until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero, right? So I think about that in terms of when we think about how history is told, who's telling the story, and it's typically those in power, right? So in research and in academia, when we think about who is telling the story, amplifying voices of community members, those with lived experience, is what we aim to do through the HER Multimedia Lab. So my research focus is in health communication, narrative medicine, and we really dive into sexual health and HIV. Community-based research, my focus is on older adults, African American women. So storytelling as knowledge. Right? Oral storytelling traditions have facilitated knowledge for centuries, right? When we think about peer-reviewed journals, I mean, this is the way that we really love to amplify voices through storytelling. It predates written scholarships, preserves lived experiences, teaches behavior and values, cultural wisdom, and community-based knowledge systems. So, you will never, ever hear me present this work without first telling you the genesis of this work, where it all comes from. This is a picture of me on the far right, my great aunt on the far left, and my auntie in the middle. This is from my paternal father's side, my paternal side. So my personal connection to this work started out in my master's program, and my great aunt, she was a social butterfly. She was the party planner. Like all the hot parties were at my auntie's house. And as she was aging, she was in her 80s, we noticed some differences with her. She started to have some cognitive decline. She started to isolate, she became combative, and just her physical environment wasn't as nicely kept as it typically was. We couldn't put our finger on what was happening with Aunt Chris. And so my cousin would take her to the doctor, and let me tell you, she was meticulous about her doctor's appointments, her annual visits. She scheduled them, she went. She worked in the healthcare profession most of her adult life. And what we later found out was that Aunt Chris had an undiagnosed sexually transmitted infection that spread to her brain. So what do we do with this, right? I'm in my master's program. My concentration is gerontology at UCLA. And not once have I ever had a class that focused on older adults, their sexual health, and that we even need to be paying attention to this, right? And so I was pissed, for lack of a better word. I had a level of pistivity that was off the Richter scale, because how does this happen, right? Aunt Chris was on top of things. She went to her doctor. She did all of the things. And yet, this oversight, this gross oversight happened to Aunt Chris. So I was in my social work program at UCLA, getting my master's. And in social work, we are social change agents, right? My shout out to my students, right? And so I had to take this level of positivity that was off the Richter scale, I think I made that word up, and flip that into something positive. What do we do with this information? What is going on with sexual health in older adults? Apparently, something is happening. And so, as I started to get into the research, I came across a stat that made my jaw drop. I literally picked it up. HIV among older Black women was off the scales. And I, again, in a very well-recognized research institution, had never come across this information. Not in my community-based research, not in my organization. I was a gerontology major, and nothing. So this is why this work is personal for me. This is my positionality. And so we're gonna talk about what I did about it and what we still continue to do about it through the HER Multimedia Lab. Health communication film. So I made a film about it, right? The storytelling, the power in story. How do we convey complex health content to community, right? We're not picking up peer-reviewed journals. We're not, seeking out information about sexually transmitted infections. In fact, it's very taboo in a lot of cultures, right? So how do we convey this information to community? And I don't want to just put it off on community, because we have providers, because with Aunt Chris's story, right? The providers overlooked. We have emerging clinicians through school. I was one of them, and I had never heard this information. So through storytelling, I decided to make a film about it. And that was I had to petition the university to allow me to do this work in this way. And they said yes. So we made the film called Even Me. Health communication film defined. It's like audiovisual storytelling through documentary narrative, and conveys health information and shapes attitudes, influences health-related knowledge, beliefs, and behaviors among audiences. So I wanted a tool. I needed a tool, because how else do we convey this information that's so taboo, right? So we walked alongside community members, right? I wanted these women and the one man in the film to be the lions of their stories, right? So I'm going to show a little snippet of it, and then we'll talk about the research that has come from it.
The largest group of growing HIV positive cases are women over 50.
I'm 62 years old, I still have sex. Yeah, it's not on a regular basis, but it's when I want it.
I'm going to be sexually active until they put me in the ground.
I'm 58. People think, well, grandmother's not going anywhere. I still have urges, and I still would love to be loved.
It's okay to be sexually active. Sex is good, right? It's part of our human nature. But let's be real about what can happen.
Have a huge demographic that's growing by leaps and bounds. We've got this big gray tsunami coming.
I never did use condoms, because I always felt that if a woman looked clean and smelled good, that they was okay.
Do you know anybody that has had protected sex for the past 30 years?
It's hard to live in a world where you're afraid and you can't talk about it freely.
Oh, I heard about this drug, so here I is.
Okay.
Coming to get tested.
Sure, come on in.
Okay.
So this is your first time being tested?
My first time.
There is no excuse no more. But that's the excuses that they use. I want the real deal. I don't get the same sensation. Shop for the right condoms and you will find one. Get creative with it.
So that was the genesis of Even Me, the docuseries. We use this work now in the training of emerging clinicians, practicing clinicians, and community members. So film exposure, audience reflections, through qualitative data, quantitative data, and thematic analysis. So we surveyed, or we showed this film and we asked, please indicate what you learned today that you did not know prior to watching this film. We had 193 free text query respondents. From this data, qualitative analysis and thematic analysis, we had 3 themes that emerged: increased awareness of sexual ageism and stigma, improved motivation for changes in practice professionally, awareness of the need for sexual health communicative skill development. So one of the quotes that came up, I never really gave thought to the 50+ population as being as sexually active because I didn't think that they were physically able to have sex, right? Now listen, this is important why. I have 1 minute left. When we're working with emerging clinicians, and these are the thoughts of an emerging clinician, we have a lot of work to do because the oversights that happen with Aunt Chris will continue to happen if we don't provide the education and awareness that is necessary for better health equity for older adults. And that is my time. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So in the storytelling, do you think that, or the narrative, do you have to have different narratives for different audiences? I believe stories are the way to communicate.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Anyone who's had grandmas and had grandma stories, passed on in terms of family. But would that vary depending on the audience, clinicians versus the...
No, and great question. She asked if the storytelling changes per audience. Absolutely not, right? Because imagine as a clinician, you're in a relationship with a clinician that may be therapeutic, maybe medical. You don't get to hear what they're saying outside of that room, right? So the beauty of the narrative storytelling is to be able to hear what folks really feel, what they really engage with outside of that therapeutic alliance, where then folks become more humanized, right? Because when you're in that clinical setting, you have 15 minutes. You don't have the time to engage them as people. But when you watch this film, and it's a short, right? When we do these films in training, the clinician can then see that person in a whole new light and say, oh my gosh, I never even thought to engage my client in this way or my patient in this way. So we use the same stories for varying audiences, and we get really good feedback and outcomes from this group. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Yes.
Have you been able to measure behavior change after watching this film, or showing it to community members? Are they getting screened more?
And I think that's the next step for us. Our main work thus far has been around awareness and education because there's such a deficit in just knowledge about this. But I think more long-term studies could have more time points where we can collect that data to see if there's actual behavior change sustained. Yeah. And you?
Similar question. I was wondering if you've noticed any difference in the field, since you heard about your aunt's diagnosis and had this kind of revelatory experience.
We have so much work to do, right? Because sexual health, sex is such a taboo topic, right? And when you think about clinicians, they're people too. And they have their own lived experience. They have their own cultures and families and beliefs and ideologies. So there's a lot of work to do in terms of getting folks on board with screening older adults, having these conversations. When we do trainings with the film, we also incorporate live role plays where clinicians can actually engage with patients. And we do this in a controlled environment that's safe and brave, where we can actually practice having these conversations, because believe it or not, these questions could be really difficult for clinicians to have with an older adult patient. So, yeah. Anyone else in the back there?
Yeah. When you were making this film, did you like have that understanding of how impactful it is to have a face to the data? Because I'm watching, like, you can read an article or you can read something that's been published, but at the end of the day, it's just words on a paper or words on a screen. But when you're actually watching people talk about their experiences, it's kind of more like engageful and impactful. Just watching people.
Absolutely. Was that a question or a comment? Because because the comment was beautifully stated, right? Definitely the storytelling, seeing the person on screen, especially when we do community events, when you see someone who looks like you or looks like your older adult relative, it brings it home. It makes it more personal, where you can say, oh my gosh, I need to have this conversation with my auntie, with my grandma, you know, or with my pop-pop. I know he's out there running around, or, you know, whatever the case may be, right? So, but thank you, and I think that's my time. Okay, thank you.